Welcome to the channel where the past is brought back to life. Today we're stepping into one of the most violent and fascinating chapters of human history, the world of ancient Rome and its never-ending struggle against the so-called barbarian tribes. Music. The Roman legions, famous for their discipline and brilliant military engineering, clashed with powerful opponents, Germanic tribes, Celts, and the Parthians. Each of these peoples had their own vision of war and their own weapons to fight it. But what made Roman arms so successful? And why did barbarian warriors, often stronger and more aggressive, usually fall before Rome's might? In this video, we'll go beyond just swords and armor. We'll look at how the Roman methodical way of fighting faced the more spontaneous but equally lethal tactics of their enemies. Together, we'll see how weapons, technology, strategy, and even psychology shaped the outcomes of epic battles. Stay with us until the end, and you'll discover how one empire, through strict organization and constant innovation, managed to conquer most of the known world. Let's begin with a weapon that is often overlooked but was absolutely vital for the Roman soldier. It wasn't his sword or his shield, it was his helmet. The Galea helmet was more than simple headgear. It was a carefully engineered piece of equipment. It offered protection while giving soldiers wide visibility, shielding not just the skull but also the face and neck. This alone set it apart from many barbarian helmets, which were usually just basic metal cones or bowls that left the sides of the head exposed. At first, this detail might seem small, but inside a tightly packed formation where every step was coordinated, being able to see clearly was critical. With the Galea, legionaries could spot the movements of comrades, follow the centurion's commands, and instantly respond to attacks. That ability to coordinate in the chaos of battle gave the Romans a huge edge. Think of it as fighting as part of a living machine, where each soldier is a piece of the mechanism and your vision is the key to survival. Over time, the Roman helmet evolved alongside changes in tactics and technology. Early in the Republic, helmets were made of bronze and provided only partial protection. Later, more advanced designs appeared, like the Imperial Gallic helmet. This version had cheek guards, a stronger visor, and a broad neck guard. All of these features were designed to deflect strikes and absorb impact, instead of transferring it directly to the soldier's head. The materials also advanced. At first, bronze was the standard, but as Rome expanded and metallurgy improved, iron became the material of choice, followed by steel. These upgrades created helmets that were stronger yet lighter, meaning soldiers could wear them longer without exhaustion. Inside, soft lining made of leather, linen, or felt cushioned blows and prevented irritation. Small as it seems, this lining made the difference between comfort and misery in long campaigns. The Galea was more than protection. It was also a badge of identity. Officers and centurions often decorated theirs with colorful plumes or crests, making them stand out in battle. Soldiers could quickly locate their leaders even in the thick of the fight. Barbarians also wore head coverings, but these were often made of leather, fur, or decorated with horns. While intimidating, they lacked the solid protection of the Roman version. For barbarians, the helmet was about personal power. For Romans, the Galea symbolized loyalty to the legion and the empire. This difference reflected two very different philosophies of war. The helmet was also central to Roman tactics. In formation, legionaries would lower their heads while locking their shields forward. Helmets protected them from overhead strikes, while the shield wall blocked frontal attacks. With this tactic, they could survive showers of arrows and javelins, then move forward to counterattack. The combination of personal armor and collective formation became a key reason behind Rome's many victories. So the Galea wasn't just armor. It was a representation of the Roman military system. Practical, efficient, and deadly. What do you think? Aside from the helmet, which piece of Roman gear was most vital for team tactics? Share your thoughts in the comments. Now, when most people picture a Roman legionary, they think of a sword. But the scutum, the massive Roman shield, was equally, if not more, important. This shield was large, rectangular, and curved. It was made of several layers of wood, coated with leather, and edged with metal for durability. Its design allowed it to deflect attacks effectively and protect the body from arrows, spears, and heavy blows. But its greatest strength wasn't the materials. It was how it was used in formation. Standing side by side, legionaries created an unbreakable wall of shields. They could even overlap them above and in front to form the famous testudo, or tortoise formation, making them almost invulnerable to missiles from above. By contrast, barbarian warriors generally carried round or oval shields. These worked well in one-on-one combat, but they couldn't form the same solid protective barrier. The scutum was also a brilliant example of Roman engineering. Its curved surface wasn't random. It helped redirect strikes and absorb force. In the center was the umbo, a metal boss that not only protected the hand but could be used offensively to punch or push the enemy. This shield was central to the Roman style of combat. With the scutum in one hand and the short sword in the other, legionaries could stay protected while thrusting at the enemy's weak points. The compact gladius with its 60 to 85 centimeter blade was perfect for quick stabbing in close quarters. Together, the shield and sword turned Roman soldiers into precise, efficient killers who could fight without breaking formation. On the other hand, barbarian fighters favored long swords for slashing, which required space to swing and were best for individual duels. In tight formations, they were far less practical. The Romans' smaller weapons, combined with their shields and teamwork, proved far superior. This is why when barbarians charged at Roman lines, they often found themselves facing a wall of shields that was nearly impossible to break. That wall wasn't just wood. It was trust. Each soldier knew his shield protected not only himself, but also the man beside him. This deep reliance on discipline and unity transformed the legion into something far greater than a group of individuals. So the scutum was more than a piece of gear. It was the physical embodiment of Rome's values: cooperation, order, and clever design. While barbarians fought as individuals, the Romans fought as one, and that's what made them so formidable. When you think about it, isn't it true even today that our personal strength means little without the support and protection of those beside us? Finally, we can't forget the weapon that became the ultimate symbol of Roman might: the gladius. This short sword, usually between 60 and 85 centimeters long, was designed specifically for thrusting attacks. In the chaos of hand-to-hand combat, especially within shield formations, a quick stab was far more lethal than a wide slash. Barbarian longswords were terrifying in single combat, but against the tight, shielded Roman ranks, they lost much of their effectiveness. A legionary with his scutum and gladius could strike fast, strike true, and never leave his formation exposed. And that combination of shield and sword, discipline and innovation, was what made Rome's legions nearly unstoppable. A legionary, locked inside the testudo formation, had no room to swing a long blade, but his gladius was perfectly suited for stabbing quickly between enemy shields. This difference wasn't just about weapons, it was about an entire philosophy of combat. The Romans fought as one body, a coordinated unit, while their barbarian opponents fought as individuals. The gladius was far more than a sword. It was a weapon built for mass combat. Every detail of its design served a purpose. Its short, wide blade ended in a sharp point, capable of driving deep, deadly thrusts. The hilt fit comfortably in the soldier's hand, giving him a steady grip even when the battle grew chaotic. The weapon was light enough to be used for repeated strikes without tiring the soldier. Another Roman advantage was standardization. Blacksmiths produced gladi in huge numbers, ensuring that every legionary carried nearly identical swords. If one was lost or broken, it could be quickly replaced. By contrast, barbarian warriors often carried unique, custom-made blades. While impressive, this lack of uniformity made their armies harder to equip and resupply. Take the Celtic spatha, for example. It was longer and heavier than the gladius, designed for sweeping, slashing strikes that could cut through armor. But in the tight Roman formations, these long blades were almost useless. Legionaries stood shoulder to shoulder behind their scutum shields, leaving no room for wide swings. A barbarian attempting a slash often found his sword caught in the wall of shields. At that moment, a Roman could thrust forward with his gladius, ending the fight in an instant. The tactic was brutally effective. Covered by his scutum, the legionary struck with his gladius, then pulled back, allowing the man beside him to step forward and attack. This created a relentless rhythm of blows, one after another, wearing down and breaking enemy morale. Where barbarians depended on raw courage and individual strength, the Romans trusted discipline and teamwork. The gladius symbolized this philosophy. It wasn't the sword of a lone hero, but of a soldier working toward collective victory. Another brilliant Roman weapon was the pilum, a heavy throwing spear designed with engineering precision. It had a long, thin iron shank connected to the wooden shaft by two rivets, one metal, one wooden. On impact, the wooden rivet broke and the iron tip bent, making the spear impossible to reuse. Even worse for the enemy, if it lodged in a shield, the shield became awkward and heavy, often forcing the warrior to abandon it. The pilum was always the opening move in a Roman assault. Before closing in, legionaries hurled volleys of these spears. They pierced shields, wounded enemies, and disrupted formations. Barbarians who depended on their shields for protection suddenly found them useless. Their lines fell into disorder before the clash even began. Barbarian tribes used throwing spears as well, but theirs were simple. Light javelins meant only to wound. They could cause injuries, but they lacked the ingenious design of the pilum, which turned an enemy's shield into a liability. The Romans didn't rely on chance, they shaped the battlefield. The pilum was proof of their pragmatic approach to war. It wasn't meant to last. It was meant to win. And often, a single reign of pila could determine the outcome before swords were drawn. Now picture this. You're a barbarian with a long sword in hand, and before you can even reach the enemy, hundreds of heavy pila are flying toward you. Your shield becomes a burden, your formation breaks apart. What would you do? Keep charging or drop everything and run? Let's turn to the weapons of the so-called barbarians. Germanic tribes, Celts, and Gauls all preferred arms that suited their fierce individual style of fighting. Their long swords, like the Celtic spatha, were ideal for open-field combat, where warriors had space to swing powerful blows. Shields were usually round or oval, often painted with bold designs. These were strong in single combat but lacked the ability to interlock into a solid wall like the Roman scutum. Axes and spears were also common. The Francisca, a Germanic throwing axe, was deadly at short distances. Celtic spears with broad heads could inflict terrible wounds. Yet, unlike Roman arms, these weapons weren't standardized. Each was crafted for a specific warrior. This gave barbarian fighters individuality, but it also meant their armies were less uniform and harder to supply. Armor was another difference. Many barbarians fought with little or no protection, relying instead on raw strength and courage. Their defense was their large shields, but again, these were designed for lone combat rather than group tactics. The Romans, on the other hand, used the lorica segmentata, metal armor that, combined with the scutum, gave them far stronger protection in formation. The barbarian style of battle was based on speed and fury. They relied on overwhelming attacks, meant to break the enemy quickly. If that initial strike failed, their momentum often collapsed. Their long swords were effective only in open space. Against the dense Roman formations, packed tightly with shields and armor, the spatha could not reach its full potential. The short gladius, however, thrived in this environment, delivering rapid, precise thrusts. The Francisca axe was another dangerous weapon, able to smash shields and armor at close range. But like the spatha, it was a weapon of the individual, not of an organized army. Even their bows, while useful, lacked the power and range of Roman archery equipment. In the end, the true difference between Roman and barbarian arms wasn't about strength or sharpness. It was about philosophy. Barbarian weapons reflected a culture where each warrior fought for himself, glory, and personal honor. Roman weapons reflected a collective system where every soldier was part of a machine, moving and striking together. It was a clash between two worlds: individual heroism against strict organization. And time again, it was discipline, coordination, and the careful design of Roman weapons that proved victorious. Roman weapons were not designed for lone warriors. They were built to function as a team. The long pilum weakened enemy defenses. The scutum formed a nearly unbreakable shield wall. and the short gladius delivered the final deadly thrust in close combat. Together, this combination created the ultimate formula for organized warfare. Barbarian armies, by contrast, depended on courage and sheer aggression. Their attacks were often fierce but lacked order. Each man fought as an individual hero, relying on personal skill rather than a united front. Their weapons could be dangerous, but they could never match the Roman system where every part, man, shield, and sword, worked toward one common victory. The Roman army was more than just soldiers. It was a machine. Every legionary went through intense training, not only to master weapons but also to fight as a single unit. They marched great distances, built fortified camps, and drilled endlessly to perfect their formations. Discipline was their lifeline. Each soldier knew his survival depended on the unity of his brothers in arms. This discipline stood in stark contrast to barbarian warriors, who often fought with bravery but far less training. The barbarians relied on overwhelming charges. If their first attack did not succeed quickly, disaster usually followed. When their furious rush met the wall of Roman shields, they were stopped cold. Their long swords could not cut through the Roman formation. Their round shields could not resist the storm of Pila, and their disorganized ranks shattered against Rome's discipline. It was always chaos against order, ferocity against control, and discipline nearly always won. But Roman superiority was not only on the battlefield, it extended to logistics as well. The Romans built roads, bridges, and fortified supply camps to keep their armies moving and well-fed. They maintained a reliable system to supply food, weapons, and reinforcements, allowing them to fight long campaigns. Barbarians, however, often ran short of supplies. Their armies were temporary gatherings that dissolved quickly without food or equipment. Rome's victories were not just won with weapons, but with the entire military system behind them. Now imagine standing shoulder to shoulder in the tight formation of a Roman legion as 1,000 barbarian warriors rush at you. What is your greatest protection besides your strength? The answer lies in unity, discipline, and the system itself. Barbarians were often larger and physically stronger than Roman legionaries. But brute strength alone was not enough. Roman weapons were not designed to win duels, they were designed to win wars. The short gladius was not the longest sword, but in the ETU crush of formation fighting, it was unmatched. The pilum was not the most powerful spear, but its ability to cripple enemy shields was priceless. Roman equipment was the product of centuries of refinement. Each weapon served a specific purpose, carefully optimized to fit into the greater system. Barbarians put their faith in raw power, but Rome trusted in planning and precision. This was not simply a clash of armies, but of two different ways of thinking. One relied on individuality and instinct, the other on organization and reason. And in large battles, reason proved stronger. The gladius, short and razor-sharp, was perfect for stabbing in the tight ranks of a legion. A Roman soldier could thrust from behind the safety of his scutum, landing fast, fatal strikes before his opponent could even swing a long sword. The fight was not about strength, but about speed and accuracy. Barbarian swords were dangerous in open duels, but useless when pressed against a wall of Roman shields. Their sweeping blows could not break through, while Roman thrusts picked them off one by one. The pilum was another example of Roman genius. It was not meant to last, it was meant to disable. When thrown, its soft iron shank bent on impact, making it useless to the enemy. Worse for the barbarian, it often stuck into his shield, making it heavy and unmanageable. This was no fair fight. It was calculated disruption. By the time the enemy lost their shields in order, the legions were ready to finish them with gladi. Roman weapons were never just tools. They were part of an interconnected system all built with one goal: victory. Another key advantage was cost and production. Roman weapons were standardized, produced in massive quantities by skilled blacksmiths, working in organized armories. Thousands of identical swords, shields, and sets of armor could be made quickly and cheaply, keeping the army always ready. Barbarians, on the other hand, often forged or purchased weapons individually. Each weapon was unique, sometimes ceremonial, but harder to replace. When a Roman lost a sword, it could be replaced easily. When a barbarian lost his, it was a personal Disaster. Training was just as important as equipment. Roman soldiers drilled for hours, learning not just to fight but to move and strike as one body. Their coordination turned them into an unstoppable wall of men and steel. Barbarians, though fierce, lacked this system and often collapsed under Roman pressure. The Roman army was built around infantry, but cavalry also played a role. Roman horsemen were not as famous as their infantry, but they carried spears, small shields, and spathas, longer swords suited for mounted combat. Their cavalry acted mainly as support, scouting, flanking, and chasing retreating enemies. Barbarian cavalry, however, could be far more dangerous. The Parthians and Sarmatians fielded cataphracts, heavily armored cavalry with long lances and deadly bows. These horsemen could smash through unprepared armies. At the Battle of Carrhae, Roman legions suffered terrible losses against Parthian horse archers and lancers. But Rome adapted. They trained their infantry to form tighter formations, use pila against charging horses, and wait for close combat to turn the tide. Roman adaptability was their greatest strength. Whether against wild barbarian charges or heavily armed cavalry, they always found a way to adjust. That flexibility, combined with discipline, logistics, and carefully designed weapons, allowed Rome not only to survive but to conquer most of the known world. The Romans eventually realized that their infantry was their greatest strength, and they learned to use it against any kind of enemy. Even when barbarian cavalry had stronger weapons, the legions could still win by relying on their discipline, careful organization, and clever tactics. The struggle between Rome and the barbarian tribes was never just about weapons, it was also about strategy. Time and again, Roman adaptability proved decisive. After their crushing defeat by the Parthians at Carrhae in 53 BC, Roman leaders, such as Mark Antony, and later emperors Augustus and Tiberius, began to rethink how they faced cavalry. They introduced new formations that could hold firm against even the most powerful charges. Legionaries trained to stand their ground against mounted warriors, locking their shields and spears into a defensive circle sometimes called the hedgehog. This formation was especially effective against heavy cavalry, which relied on brute force but struggled to maneuver in close quarters. The Romans also began to see the importance of light infantry. These fast-moving units, armed with bows and javelins, worked alongside cavalry to harass enemy horsemen, forcing them to retreat under a rain of missiles. This was a major shift in Roman military thinking. Where once they had relied almost entirely on heavy infantry, they now developed a more balanced army. Pragmatic by nature, the Romans never hesitated to learn from defeat. Their ability to adapt and evolve was the real secret to their long-term success. In contrast, barbarian armies were far less flexible. Their tactics and weapons often changed little over generations. They relied heavily on tradition, personal courage, and the strength of individual warriors. Against Rome's evolving military system, this approach left them at a disadvantage. The confrontation was not just a clash of swords and spears, but a battle of minds, and Roman adaptability almost always gave them the edge. One of the biggest differences between Rome and the barbarians was armor. Celtic and Germanic warriors often wore little or no armor, trusting instead in their large round shields. Roman legionaries, on the other hand, were protected by the lorica segmentata, a segmented suit of metal plates held together with leather straps. It was strong, flexible, and could be repaired quickly in the field. Against the heavy slashing blows of barbarian swords and axes, this armor was far more effective than chainmail or leather. While some barbarians did use chainmail, it was rare and usually reserved for wealthy elites. Most fighters preferred mobility over protection, sacrificing armor for speed. But when they faced Roman legions in tight formations, this choice left them terribly exposed. A storm of pila could devastate warriors without armor, and once the battle closed to hand-to-hand combat, the Roman soldier's protection gave him a clear advantage. The lorica segmentata, introduced during the early empire, was one of Rome's greatest achievements in military engineering. Its horizontal steel strips provided excellent protection while allowing free movement, making it superior to chainmail. It was designed specifically to counter the weapons of barbarian tribes: long swords, broad spears, and heavy axes. Combined with the scutum, the large rectangular Roman shield, legionaries could endure attacks that would have destroyed less protected armies. Barbarian warriors were often courageous and fast, but when locked in combat against well-armored Romans, they found themselves at a disadvantage. Their wild slashes often bounced harmlessly off Roman armor, while short thrusts from the gladius found every gap in their defenses. Once again, Rome's systematic approach to warfare triumphed over individual heroism. Another decisive Roman advantage was mass production. Roman weapons and armor were standardized and produced in huge quantities. Every gladius, every pilum, every scutum was built to the same model. This made training easier and maintenance simpler. If a legionary's sword broke, it could be replaced immediately. If a soldier fell, another could pick up his weapon and use it without hesitation. Barbarian warriors had no such system. Their swords and spears were often unique, crafted by local blacksmiths or even made by the warriors themselves. While this gave their weapons character, it also made them hard to replace. A broken sword could leave a warrior helpless. A Roman legionary, however, always had spare equipment within reach. Rome's logistical system supported this efficiency. The empire built networks of roads and supply lines that kept its armies fed, armed, and reinforced. Fortified camps provided rest and repairs during long campaigns. Armories, or fabricae, operated not just in Rome but across the provinces, producing weapons on an almost industrial scale. This system resembled a modern assembly line centuries ahead of its time. Barbarian armies, by contrast, lacked organized supply chains. They often carried their own food, which quickly ran out. Without steady supplies, they could not hold out during sieges or extended campaigns. Rome, however, could keep fighting, far from home, knowing its soldiers would always have the equipment and food they needed. This made every Roman victory more than just a battlefield triumph. It was also a victory of planning, logistics, and engineering. The Romans knew that war was not simply about bravery or strength. It was about preparation, organization, and efficiency. These principles allowed them to overcome even larger armies. The Roman military machine proved itself time and again. Standardization, discipline, logistics, and engineering turned Rome into more than a state. It became a war engine. Their weapons were not just tools for combat, but part of a larger system where everything worked together. The helmet offered visibility, the scutum provided group protection, the pilum weakened enemy shields, and the gladius delivered the final strike. Barbarian warriors fought with immense courage, but their individualism could not overcome Rome's collective strength. Their weapons were deadly in one-on-one combat, but ineffective against the disciplined formations of the legions. In the end, it was not just strength against strength. It was fury against order, and order prevailed. The clash between Rome and the barbarians was ultimately a clash of cultures. Rome's victories were not due to stronger men, but to a stronger system. Their discipline, organization, and adaptability allowed them to conquer and hold much of the known world. It was the triumph of planning over improvisation, of engineering over passion. What do you think we should cover next? Would you like to hear about the Viking warriors or perhaps the rise of the samurai? Share your ideas in the comments and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming stories.